didn't say anything.
Corey Blair with Venture Architects.
Kurt Gardner with the Samuels Group.
I'll turn this way since I know you guys. Over here. My name's Phil Grassman. I'm the Chief Deputy for the Sheriff's Department. I've been here for 20 years, and I also serve on the Strickland Town Board.
Sheriff Jeff Wallace, been with the county since 2001, sheriff since 2015.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. So we're just gonna go over a few things today. First of all, some bigger things that have happened in the county over the last couple of years. First and foremost, we have new courthouse hours. Well, they're not new, but some of you might not be aware that we close early on Fridays. So the courthouse is open Monday through Thursday, 8 to 4:30, and on Fridays from 8 to 12:30. And just so you know, staff is still working their normal hours, but we have a flex work policy, so they have to get in their 38.75 or 40, depending on which schedule they're on in that time frame. So if you come 12:30 on a Friday, you won't be able to get into the general courthouse. You'll only have access up to the court system. We have also implemented recently some security measures. So all of the public is using the east entranceway by the county clerk's office. We also put a window in at the clerk's office, so Tracy's kind of the face of the county. If someone comes in and they don't know where to go, they stop in at that window. Your badges, however, should work at all of the entrance doors, and if they don't, please let me know. 2024 is a negotiation year for union contracts within the sheriff's office, so that will be big if you're on the personnel committee. Last year in March, we implemented a wage scale, and that study was done through Carlson Detman. Ashley, do you want to kind of explain what that means?
Yeah, so each position is graded on this pay scale that we have with Carlson Detman. So we have our positions in the category and then a grade with each category and then a step. So I think our scale goes up to step 20 something. When it was implemented, most were on the step 1 to 2-ish, depending on where they fell and how long they've been with the county. What we are typically doing now is that we are staying with that Carlson Detman wage study. So if we have a new position that comes available to the county, or we have a change in the job description, we send that out to Carlson Detman to get graded. When the grade comes back, that will be where it falls on our wage scale, and then also that will tell us each step of that scale. When we implemented this study, we implemented it at the 25th to 50th percentile. So think of, a scale. Here they gave us, here's where you stand, you can choose where to implement this. We implemented it about here at the 25th to 50th percentile. Asking what we should do every year as far as the maintenance to keep the scale up to date so we stay competitive with the market. We should be doing a cost of living adjustment every year on the scale is what they recommend, and then also stepping our employees every year 1 to 2 steps at least yearly. Last year we did a 1-step increase, so effective January 1st of 2024, we did a 1-step increase, and we did not do a cost of living adjustment scale move. So just with the maintenance phase, what they're saying is since we implemented it at the 25th to 50th percentile, and then didn't maybe do a cost of living adjustment, we're probably, about here with where we should be with the market value according to. And I think when they did that, they looked at many other positions, like similar positions. What the each department, each position had to do is to do a JDQ. So you might hear them say that term a lot, a JDQ, which is a job description questionnaire. So they had to fill out a very, very comprehensive questionnaire, and that's what was sent in to determine that grade of the position and where they fall on the wage study. Yeah, each step is so in between like step 1 and step 2, it's 1.25% increase is where we in between that step. Typically with a new employee coming in, when we're hiring new employees, we would have the authority as the HR manager and the hiring committee to put anybody on the scale between step 1 and step 5. but obviously keeping in mind where our current employees are and the qualifications that, these applicants have coming in. Anything above a step 5 would have to come to the personnel committee to be approved to start at that higher step. So typically, 95% of the time, 90% of the time, we're probably starting a new employee right at step 1. But if you were to look at our job posting online, that wage posted is through step 1 through step 5 is what it's posted.
And the rationale for passing the wage scale, and Jamie and I were not in our current positions when this process started, but from what we gathered talking to Carlson Detman and hearing from EMB and Kinsey, kind of what their frame of mind was that raises were not being given out fairly or equitably. So implementing a wage scale puts everyone on the same playing field. And if everyone gets a 1-step increase, then you can't say that, certain departments are always getting raises and some are not. So, does anyone have questions on Carlson Detman? No? Okay, great.
So, and on that note, anytime anybody has questions, I mean, again, we'll continue to talk and ramble, but if you guys have questions specific to anything, interrupt, and I guess this is, we're here to hopefully get you guys some knowledge and figure out what you guys wanna learn, and stop and interrupt anytime.
Okay, another big thing going on right now is that we have an RFP, which is a request for proposals out on the old hospital site, which includes the vacant Marshfield Clinic building. We got that land appraised and it came in at $830,000, and the clinic building appraised at just about $1 million at a general office use, and about $1.9 million if it were to be used as a clinic facility. So the responses to that proposal are due back July 12th, and the board had made the decision that the property committee is going to handle going through all of those proposals and conducting any interviews that they feel are necessary, and then their recommendation or their thoughts will then be presented to the full board for action, probably sometime in August, I would think, August or September. We also officially on Friday acquired the old Prevea Clinic building, so this week will be kind of a maintenance week for them out there. We have a signed contract with Oakleaf. So we are strictly just building owners. We have nothing to do with operations out there. We are just the landlord. We have a triple net lease with them, meaning that they cover maintenance, taxes, which there are none now that we own it, and insurance. So if you have questions on that lease or anything about that, please just let Rich know. The animal shelter committee is also at this point considering a possible addition to the shelter. We partnered with an architectural firm out of Madison. We have the final schematics that just came back late last week, and the estimated cost for constructing that 20 by 40 addition is $636,000. So that is, again, probably something that will be brought to the board at some point as well. Any questions so far? Okay, great. So we're gonna get into roles and responsibilities. So I heard some of you serve on town boards already. That's fantastic. So you probably already know this. We'll go over it quickly. This was one of the handouts that was emailed to you. So the county board is the legislative branch of county government. The board adopts laws and budgets, levies taxes, and otherwise sets policy. So you also received in that email that I sent a copy of your job description. And there's just one part that I want to call out, and then I'll hand it over to Rich. It's italicized about halfway down the page on the first page. It's important that county supervisors understand their distinct role. A supervisor's role as part of the team is to set policy that gives guidance to department heads. Supervisors help establish goals and parameters for department heads to guide them through their daily decision-making process. Supervisors should never direct or interfere with an employee's daily work. All issues or concerns about a department's operation should be addressed at a committee meeting. Is there anything else you want to add?
So, yeah, on that note, just an individual board member really has no power or control to do anything. The structure of the county board is there's 19 county board members in Rusk County, and then as you guys are probably aware, the committee on committees selected each of you to sit on a certain number of committees. The committees then is what controls or operates at the government level. There's 5-member committee that then makes the decisions regarding day-to-day operations for the staff. an individual board member has no control, should not micromanage, and should not generally deal with issues of an employee of the county. Those are done at the committee level. Again, an individual board member really has no control by himself or herself. So, again, I don't know, there's been some committees last week, but generally then what's going to happen at your organizational committee meetings is there's 5 members of the committee. You guys then will organize at that meeting, and you guys will appoint a chair and a vice chair. The chairman is going to be the leader of that committee. That person is going to control the meetings, dealing with public comments, making sure that meetings run at an appropriate pace, and again, specifically only talking about things that are on the agenda. So, you guys are public officials, which means that when we have meetings, we can only talk about things that are on the agendas, okay? If it's not on an agenda, you cannot talk about it, as that's a violation of the open meetings, okay? Second thing, walking quorums. You guys are, go ahead.
You were talking about county board supervisors for that
Yes,
statement, correct?
yes,
That also applies to anybody in attendance at the meetings, correct?
oh, public comment, yes. So, the board members should not, speak at the public comment. The board members are going to speak at the meeting. It's their meeting to conduct business. They don't need to talk at public comment. The public comment for people who are there, generally the rule is, we've done 3 to 5 minutes of public comment and limited to that. The public comment portion of the meeting should only discuss items that are on the agenda that is going to be, talked about by the board itself. Right? Okay, yeah. I guess jumping, I don't know.
Well, okay, can you hit on constitutional?
Yep. So, the county board members are unique in that they create policy and they also have some sort of executive action to make sure that the policy that you're creating is being enforced. As part of that though, we have constitutional offers that the county employs, that the county board really has no control over as they're elected. The constitutional offers are the county clerk, the county treasurer, county register of deeds, the clerk of courts, the sheriff, and that's it. Yes, and so they are elected every 4 years. There's elections coming up this November. Again, they are county employees, but the county board really has very little control over them as they're elected by the public, just like you guys are. So they do supervise, so you have this dichotomy where the county elected officials have control over county employees and unique circumstances at certain times. So, a couple other things. Walking quorums. So, when you're at a committee meeting, there's generally 5 people there, which makes a quorum 3 people. Caution using any electronic device that you have, whether it be text messages or emails, those records that you send, if it's concerning county business, your personal cell phones are public records if you're conducting county business on those. Shoot out a text to somebody regarding county policy, county business, those things are able to be received. We have been getting some of those. Again, just be cognizant of any email that you send, any text message that you send are public records that are able for people to make those requests and obtain. Walking quorums, similar to that is if we start doing group text or if we are doing the telephone game, calling up people in an effort to make decisions. Again, walking quorums, those are meetings, okay, that are inappropriate to have. All of your meetings need to be properly published with an agenda, and they should be done in open session. Under the statute, there's certain aspects that we can do in closed session, but those are statutorily defined. Generally, all meetings are open to the public unless they meet one of these specific requirements that allow you to go into a closed session. So again, caution about conducting business or talking to people regarding county business. Again, walking quorums, which again is a violation of the law.
Okay, I think we're gonna hit on next, some other responsibilities if you do happen to be elected as a committee chair. So chairs are in charge of their agendas. So staff really shouldn't be creating agendas, that's up to whoever the chair is of that committee. So just know that if you're gonna throw your hat in the ring to be elected chair. We talked about public comment, did you wanna mention anything else about the chair dictating?
You know, and the chair is the meeting gatekeeper. Again, you guys are there to conduct business. It should, again, only talk about things that are on the agendas. I know there's been some conversations that get off track. Again, it's the chair's job to bring it back on track, only talk about the things that are on the agenda. If something didn't make an agenda item, again, you're gonna put that on next month's agenda to talk about it. Don't talk about things that aren't on the agendas.
Okay, and then the last point, anything that isn't dictated in our ordinance as far as any kind of board rules, then we defer to Robert's Rules of Order. And we wanna talk a little bit about decorum.
So, a few things. One is when we are at these board meetings, committees are generally more informal than the county board meetings. When you're at a county board meeting and you are discussing things, you should direct your comments only at the chair. We're not having a debate between people, we're directing our comments at your board chair. Under Robert's rules and our ordinance, generally speaking, I think depending on the chair that you have, has been lax. But generally speaking is when somebody speaks, they're able to speak only one time on a topic, okay? Until everybody else has had an opportunity to speak on that topic. Then a person can speak a second time and only a second time on that topic. And again, your speeches or your statements should be limited to less than 10 minutes on any individual topic. I know, again, at specifically the last board meeting, we had some back and forth that, again, I've talked with the chair about how we wanted to do that in the future. Again, it's his meeting to do, but again, your topics or your conversations should be limited to 10 minutes, only one time. It's not, I get to talk, somebody else gets to talk, I get to talk, somebody else gets to talk, I get to talk. I should limit my speech to one, potentially two times.
Okay, so I just wanted to, this black book that Connie gave you at the last meeting, all of these topics we're discussing are acknowledged in this book. So if you haven't read through it yet, I would strongly suggest that you do. There's really good information in here. And we're gonna do a courthouse tour in a little bit, but there are also a breakdown of different positions and departments within the county and what their responsibilities are. So if you got, sat on land and water and you don't know anything about what they do over there, this is a great introduction. So I encourage you to look at this book. Does anyone have any questions at all about open records requests or how to run a meeting or when it's appropriate to talk? Also, did you mention if you don't have the floor, you shouldn't be making a motion?
So that's kind of unique, is we have these computer pads that you're able to do that. So when it happened, I don't know if it was last month or the previous month, somebody hit the make a motion button, okay? You can't make a motion until you have the floor. So you have to get called on by the chair. Once you have the floor to speak, then you can hit the make a motion button. Don't do that until you have the floor, as it's out of order. Same thing, well, again, anytime you're making motions, amendments, same thing, is you need to have the floor before you do it.
So on that tablet, you would ask to speak and then?
Correct. Then once you have the chair calls on you to speak, then hit the make a motion button or the amendment or whatever you're going to do.
Any other questions about general responsibilities, what your role is, anything like that? No? Okay, all right, let's talk finances.
Okay. These around. Okay, so, levy limits, so our budget is funded, partly by levy, which we get about, just under $9 million a year in levy, partly by intergovernmental grants.
Explain what the levy is though.
Okay, the levy is property taxes levied on to taxpayers, and that is based on, it was set in stone. We have levy limits, so I think, was it 2010? that the levy limits were set, and so the only way our property taxes can increase, is by net new construction or, debt service, general obligation debt being issued. Otherwise, our levy limit is what it is, and goes up 1 to 2% per year for the, net new construction. So on that first page there, you'll see the historic taxes levied as well as the equalized value. But just because your property value goes up, doesn't necessarily mean that your taxes are gonna go up. So, you know, house values have been going up, but that doesn't increase our levy. It actually will kind of decrease our mill rate as your property values go up, but that doesn't mean our tax rates go up. So, in addition to levy, we have, grant funding sources. We have, sales tax, shared revenue, forestry stumpage. They bring in about $1 million. Well, we budget for $1 million, but, the last couple of years, they brought in quite a bit more than that. So that's what funds are, mainly our operating budget. If we borrow money, it has to be for capital needs. So, you know, the length of the debt service that we're paying needs to be less than or equal to the life of whatever it is that we're using to purchase. So we can't, you know, issue general obligation debt to fund operating costs. So on the second page here is kind of our tentative, budget calendar. In June, our department rolls our budget worksheets for each department, and gets those ready. And in June, we don't know what wage increases are gonna be for the next year. We don't know what our health insurance costs are gonna go up. We typically don't know yet what the WRS rates are going to be, so we budget our wages and benefits based on what the previous year's current rates are. And then, as part of our budget process, we will throw an amount into our contingency fund to cover those increases in wages and benefits, so that it's in our budget, but it's not within each individual department budget. We work with our departments that are heavily grant funded to help them build in potential increases, so that there's certain positions that are only funded by grants, so they need to have a better estimate of what those increases are going to be. So that kind of happens in June. We get those all rolled. It's a very manual process. We're hoping to build into our 2025 budget a budgeting software that will kind of make the process easier for all departments as well as county board members to see the kind of the active budgeting worksheets. And then in July, the departments are to kind of submit their budget proposals and they enter in the amounts that they think that they're going to need the next year budget cycle based on staffing needs, equipment expenditures, that sort of thing. And they present those to their oversight committees prior to bringing them to the finance committee. And then the finance office, we get those budget worksheets back at the beginning of August. We kind of look at them for reasonableness, especially with the 12-month projections of where they're going to be at for the current fiscal year. In August, we get the DOR releases the net new construction rates, so we know how much we'll be able to increase our levy by for net new construction. We're able to calculate our debt service levy, because we do go over our levy limit for debt service, as well as ambulance too is another thing that allows us to go over our our levy limit. In August and September, there's a lot of finance committee meetings. Each individual department comes and meets with the finance committee to discuss their budget, kind of explain how they came up with the numbers that they did. Finance committee might ask some questions and say, you know, is this number reasonable? Do you think you have enough there? And then in September, the finance committee, in conjunction with the finance department, we work on balancing that budget, figure out how we can make our revenues match our expenditures, and possibly utilize some previous years' roll forward if we need to. In October, we kind of provide a general budget overview to the county board, get that notice published in the paper, and in November, the board will adopt the full budget. In the third page there is the budget proposal. That's what gets published with the newspaper, and this shows all of our other revenue sources. So our general property taxes for the general fund, about 6.2 million for 2024, but it also shows the sales tax amount in there, and we did exceed that for 2024. We had, in 2023, we exceeded our budgeted amount for sales tax. Another thing that brings in quite a bit of revenue is we had over $1 million in interest revenue, that the treasurer's office manages in 2023, but that's hard to predict what the interest rates are going to be. And yeah, you'll see the state and federal grants and aids. The Health and Human Services budget is heavily grant funded. They do have some levy in there, but a lot of their programs and their services are mandated, so they really do their best to utilize all the grant funding that they have available, but at the end of the day, there might end up having to be extra levy put into the Health and Human Services Fund to cover placement costs for, sometimes it's youth, sometimes it's, adult mental health situations. And then the subsequent pages show how much levy goes into each specific budget. So if there's zeros, that just means that that budget is funded by a source other than levy. Do you guys have any questions?
Okay, thanks Jamie. So now we're gonna do an overview of capital spending for 2024 and 2025. The first thing I wanna say is that this board has not voted to issue any debt at this point. We have not issued GO bonds or anything like that yet. The only approved capital project so far are highway projects. Those were approved by the board in January, for a total amount of $1,789,270. These funds are to go towards the county highway M engineering plans at about a cost of $100,000, and then the rest will be used for paving P. The second capital project budgeted for but not yet approved by the board is the emergency communication tower upgrades. An RFP, which is a request for proposal, was advertised and 2 companies submitted responses. The first round of interviews was conducted, with the second round scheduled for this Friday. The budgeted amount in the 2024 budget was $2,430,938 with no final bid amount yet set. So the sheriff's office will be meeting on Friday with a vendor to see if the amount that they came in with can be cut at all. The final capital project under consideration is a new jail facility. And we have here today with us Kurt Berner from the Samuels Group and Corey Beyer from Venture Architects. Most of you came to at least one of the town halls. Thank you so much for doing that. Today we're gonna run through the same stuff we talked about, but give you guys the opportunity to ask whatever questions you need to ask of them. And right now we're looking at a number of about $38.5 million. That would be an impact to our mill rate of 73 cents per $1,000 of valuation. Do you wanna, okay.
Good morning, everyone. I think most of you attended the meeting. Anyone that did not? Okay. I was prepared to go through this entire slideshow, and I don't want to bore you again with the information that was here. Is there any specific questions you have about what was presented? I think one of the things that I had got a lot of feedback on was kind of how did you get here? The jail itself has been talked about for several years, and the need that's been identified there, and the process to be able to get to where we are today was really defined by the master plan that was created a few years ago, and then that the jail was the priority, and then starting to hone in on what are the possible solutions for the jail and where is it located. So it's not something that just happened overnight, it's something that you've been needing to deal with, and with that master plan that was put together, it's really prioritizing all the things that the county has in regards to their infrastructure needs, and how do you then put a long-range plan of what's first, what's second, what's third, understanding that that study came back saying jail was first priority, highway shop was second priority. So as you're planning for this, how do we deal with the jail's needs, and then how do we deal with the highway shop needs in the future, and what's the time frame of being able to do that? So this has been something that's been a while in the making. Any questions on specifics? Because I can go through the need. Obviously, you're gonna get a tour today. The need is really revolving around a building that has lived its life in regards to infrastructure, components that were original design elements of that building that don't meet your needs today. Classification being one of them. We spent quite a bit of time talking about classification. Was there any questions about classification that came up or you had after the meeting in regards to what does that all entail? What are the things tied into that? Anything related to classification that you have questions on?
I don't think the general public's gonna understand
No.
classifications, because
So-
I got asked that at my township meeting last Thursday,
Okay,
and they are completely wrong.
okay,
So I don't know how we could do that better.
okay. I can tell you that one of the things that I had from individuals coming back to me after some of those meetings was it helped clarify to them the meetings, that when we presented to them, they had a better understanding of that. So I don't know if the individual that you met with had attended one of the meetings or not. You know, that would be something that I think it was a better understanding in regards to, we're not just talking about gender issues, because that's the misnomer out there, is that we're just talking about gender issues. We're not. We're talking about a population, a jail population that's completely different than what it was 20, 30 years ago. And then how do they manage that classification piece?
I had about 12 people there. I mean,
Okay.
that was one of the big questions, and one of the other questions was, can you hear me?
No, it wasn't just me.
The location of the building, what was the deciding factor for
Sure.
that? And in 15, 20 years, is it gonna require another update, and do we have room to expand off that?
Great, yep. Yeah, and so those questions were in the handout, you know, that a lot of people had some of those questions. These two examples here, I think have brought some clarity to some people about linear jail. So you right now have a linear jail, which is essentially a line of cells. It really gives you some issues associated with safety, because you don't have the sight lines that you should have in regards to being able to see what's happening in day rooms or individual cells. It is labor intensive when you start to look at the staff and its inefficiency in regards to the linear configuration. So that, from that perspective, we'll talk a little bit about the options that we looked at. This pod design, again, from the presentation, you can see we're really talking about a three-post staff model, so that you have somebody that's in that master control or pod control area. You've got a rover, and then you've got somebody at booking. If we were going to look at renovation or addition, to create another linear component, it starts to add more staff, which we just heard the presentation in regards to your operational limits versus what you can do with bonding. And that's really the difference between the decisions that you make long-term, to your point about what does that look like in the future of 10 to 15 years. Renovation was a big piece. This one here, the reason that we don't have a floor plan up here is for security purposes, so that the jail's floor plan is not out for public consumption for obvious reasons. But the challenge that you have with your current jail is, if we were going to go in and renovate your current jail, all of your inmates would need to be housed out of county while that renovation is taking place. That renovation can take anywhere from 18 months to 24 months, depending on how we phase it. Your structure, your building structurally cannot support the load that would happen on that second floor to be able to renovate this. So your lower level would have to be, people would have to be displaced from this space as well while the renovation was taking place. Structural enhancements would have to take place on the first floor to support the second floor. And because your current jail design is not compliant with the codes required for cell size, day room size, all those components, you would renovate that space and actually get less beds that's up there now with the investment of the dollars on that renovation piece. So renovation, is one of those elements that has been quickly earmarked as not feasible in regards to, first cost, to be able to deal with out-of-county expenses, as well as the construction and renovation cost, displacement of staff, all of those things that are tied into the renovation. So these, I'm gonna just go through the options that were explored and the way we talked about it. This first one, really was taking that pod that you see up on that north half, and this was closing Minor Ave. It was something that when was presented to the city, again, it wasn't an official presentation to the city, but we went there and had discussions about it. It was not well received in regards to shutting down, one of the main streets in Ladysmith. But the model that is here, this model is the most efficient design that does the least amount of work on your campus. And what I mean by that is you want to be able to find something that you can park close to the courts with minimal renovation, and so that you're only focusing on building a jail. And that's what this is. This represents getting that housing unit, which would be that pod, as close to the courts as you can, with all of the jail support being south of that. And then the connection to that housing into the courts would be literally knocking a hole in that south wall, connecting onto an existing corridor that's there, and using some existing cells as your court holding piece. This was the most efficient design in regards to the staff component, as well as minimal disruption to your campus. But for obvious reasons of being able to shut down Minor, it wasn't one that was explored further. This next one here, there was really a direction by the ad hoc to do our best to keep the same program. And what I mean by program is same number of beds, same jail support, and fit it on this block, meaning don't go outside of the parameters of this block that the courthouse currently sits on. And all of the iterations that I've showed at the public meetings show that, and there were limitations to each one of them. Obviously, this one here shows that we would have to do some demolition of that southeastern corner of your building. It still reaches over into 4th Ave or 4th Street that's there. We've got limitations in regards to what we have to do for displacement of that space, so then we would have to have renovation for those apartments that are in there. Consumes the parking on that east side. And one of the bigger things is that when we talked about that master planning, it doesn't give you the option to what is your next phase when the courthouse needs to be replaced. And I think that's something that you've always got to be thinking about 10, 20, 30, 40 years in advance, is there has to be a discussion about replacement of these buildings at some point, and you want to be able to make that first decision, so it's the first step of what does that look like in 30 years when you got to do something with the balance of the campus. This one here, you would be hamstrung in regards to where does it go to be able to make a connection if you have to replace the courthouse, the balance of the office space that's in there. And most of these had the same issues associated with this one. You can see this one as well as taking that 95 wing. So this one here is really parking it up in that inside corner of your existing courthouse. This one here, when it says relocate radio tower, I didn't touch on that enough in the public meetings, is that there are elements that when we just connect to this southern portion here, there is a communication tower that sits in that very northwest corner where that pod would be. That tower would have to be relocated. There's a bunch of communication components that are in there, so we want to stay away from that for obvious cost in regards to relocation, for really no net benefit in regards to where that would go. This again, you're seeing all different ways that we were going to make these changes. Some there was only one that actually fit completely on the block without going over what your required setbacks would be. Each one of these have their own cons. Obviously, this one still has to deal with the tower. We're still affecting 4th Street. We're gonna have to do elements in regards to that south wing is still gonna have to be demolished, and we're gonna have to find new spaces for the renovation of that. This one here still got into 4th. This one here was really parking it in that northeast corner and then coming back in and doing a connection with limited scope, reduction of scope, where I think this one we only got to like 50-some beds in regards to this parking and taking the northeast corner of the parking lot.
And that was your 3-story option.
Correct. Yeah. As soon as we stack that, that's a good point. As soon as we stack that, we start to put 3 stories where we would have, jail support. And we talk about jail support, it would be your intake, the booking area, your kitchen, your laundry would be on that lower level, and your housing up on the upper floors. It really starts to deal with inefficient function or flow of staff. You would have to add another post, in regards to that 24/7 staffing component that's tied into those elements. So in here, we're taking the entire 95 building down, we're still covering up 4th. And this is obviously where we are today with that skywalk. I will tell you that the skywalk has been a topic that was brought up in the public meetings. We've got several emails, in regards to the skywalk about, do we need the skywalk? The skywalk is that connection of safety, between housing to the courts. And you don't want those individuals exposed into what I would say public space, whether it be walking them across the street, whether it be walking them down a public corridor. You want them to come from the housing unit in a concealed or a secure corridor, and then they walk into the courtroom, and the only place that you see the public and that individual from the inmate's perspective, where they see individuals, is in the courtroom. And after the court proceedings are done, then they leave, and then they're back into housing. This is the model that we're looked at. Question about, can a tunnel be put in there? Yes, a tunnel could be constructed, but the tunnel has complications as well. We would then have to relocate all of the utilities around the block, because we could not go through the tunnel with the utilities that are there, so there's an expense associated with that. We would still have to deal with an additional elevator. There would have to be an elevator placed on the courthouse side, because we would obviously be below ground. We'd have to bring them up to 2nd floor, so there'd have to be elevator and all the supporting infrastructure for an elevator on the courthouse side, where if you're looking at this connecting link, the skywalk makes the most sense in regards to longevity, of that space, as well as costs associated with it. It's still, there's a cost to it, but it is the best long-term solution in regards to making that connection piece. Yes, sir?
On all these different options, from what I've been reading, the price tag is real close to the same on most of them?
Yeah, the question about the skywalk and the tunnel, the number is real close by the time we do the investment, because what we would have to do is reroute utilities all the way around the block. We'd have to deal with the elevator components, and then obviously constructing the tunnel, so they're in very close proximity of one another.
How long is that skywalk proposed? How wide is it? Cause right now we have an issue where they're taking people who may not want to go wherever they're going.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're just compounding that issue right there. We're putting them in a confined space with people for that distance, transporting them to the courtroom, okay? And it's $38.5 million before we get any bids on it. So, I mean, are we locked? They will not go over $38.5 million for this, or is there a possibility it can cost us more than that?
So there's a possibility it could cost you less than that. There's a possibility it could cost you more. So the way the process works is we get approval from the county board to build this building, because right now it's real close to schematic design, meaning we have a preliminary floor plan. There are 3 phases in design: schematic design, design development, and then construction documents. So as we get into design development, we're gonna take that floor plan, and now we're gonna start to put all of the infrastructure, mechanical, electrical design that's in that building. At the end of that design development process, what we do is we go out for a budget check. And what that budget check is we will then take that document out to the contractors and say, what would it be in today's dollars if we did this design? At that point, if we see that it's over, we can make adjustments in regards to that scope of that work to maintain that budget. The next phase is then construction documents, where finalization of design elements to get it street ready, meaning that we get all of the specifications written so that it will then be sent out to the world for hard bid. So everything that is done on this work is a hard bid process. So we'll break it down into bid categories so that we can maximize local contractor involvement. Anybody can come in and bid on that work. We then have a bid day. We have a bid opening where we read those bids publicly. We do a qualification of all of those bidders. Once the qualification is done, we bring that tabulation back to the committee or board, however you set it up, for us to make a recommendation. Even at that point, when you have those bids, you're not locked into that. You can say, if we're over budget, we're gonna pull back and revise scope to maintain it. you still have the ability at that point to be able to make those discussions. Over the last 3 years, we've seen significant increases, right? Monthly, yearly, or in regards to what those elements are. So to give you your answer, and I have no contractors that have found that number, but what we have done is we've used that number historically of what's happened over the last 3 years to use them as price indicators. And from those elements, we feel that we've got the right number based on the scope. Now, if we add scope to this, from what this is, the number's gonna go up. If we reduce the scope, obviously, we can keep that down.
So now, again, the skywalk.
So the width right now, that corridor would be 8 foot wide. So it would be the same width as what we would put inside of the housing unit. So you would not have this confined.
And what's our length total to get to the courtroom as opposed to sticking?
Oh, you're right.
touching it?
I'm in full agreement.
thinking about the safety of
Yep.
our law enforcement officers
Yep.
escorting people to and from court.
Yep.
Yeah, I get it. People may not wanna go to jail, but how many people go to court and aren't happy either when they find out what they, or really have something else planned for walking across that skywalk?
Yes.
Because we put them in a position where they are vulnerable for that extra distance. Now we're liable for that as well.
Yes. I'm in full agreement with you. The closer that you could get housing to courts, the better. This is the closest parameter that we would have outside of sliding it up to that south piece. I think that ends up being the 80 or 90 feet, Corey. I think additional 90 feet that we're having it there. But you're right. We're extending the distance from housing to courts in this model.
The issue we have right now with being in confined spaces with inmates is we have to be in an elevator with them to the court now.
I get that, but we're still putting you 80 feet away from
Right.
the corridor that you need to get to where you're gonna get into the courtroom.
Right.
I mean,
I'd rather be in a hallway than in an elevator.
Well, and I understand that, but that's,
Yep.
you know, in my opinion, that's unacceptable.
It is.
That is unacceptable, and I understand where you're coming from, I get it, but for people's, that's unacceptable. It just is. It's the liability that goes into that, which we already have upstairs as it is. I was up there this morning, okay? I'm gonna admit it to everybody in here, there ain't enough money in the world to get me to work up there. It ain't gonna happen. I've been through it, I've seen it. I understand the need, but we're just shifting it here.
And I think that's kind of the basis that I got out of the public meeting, that there were some that came up to me afterwards and are starkly opposed to it, don't want a jail, get it, don't want taxes to go up. But then there were others that shared with me, you know, I can see the need that's there, I don't necessarily agree with where you're putting it.
So I live in Glencore, I'm gonna be straight and honest with you. Our largest employer in the Hawkins area just announced they're closing their doors.
Right.
340 jobs are gone, okay? My phone's been ringing since I was elected to the board about the jail, and it hasn't stopped since Geldwin announced they were closing. We're gonna have a hard time selling $38.5 million to 340 people who just lost their jobs.
Understood. Yep.
So, I mean, we need to be thinking about this, because I know for a fact, there's nobody in my district right now who thinks we should be doing this at all.
Understood. Yep. And I think that's obviously an element that's playing a role in your district that's tied into that. And the other element that we will be bringing to this group, the full board in May, is that if decisions are made not to do something with the jail as a build, it will have an operating impact in regards to costs. And that's really where taking that information to your constituents to say, we've got a hard decision to make, which one makes the most sense on that decision, is really gonna be the element that's tied into that. So, we talked about the operating piece, and we'll get into more of that with the full board, because that was one question that come up many times, is the operating component. Out of county is part of that discussion. What do we do downtown with some limited renovation? Those sorts of things were questions that had come up. So, but your comment is not different than what I had heard. We didn't have anybody that can say that's the best option. Is there's questions about where the options. I think people know there is a need, it's just what's the best solution. The other one that came out of this, and I don't have it shown here, would be if we just build this somewhere else. If we just built the jail somewhere else, find a spot, I heard comments at the meeting, get it out of town, park it next to the mine, which I don't know exactly where that was, but those were the sorts of places, basically getting it away from neighborhoods, right? This jail, we could put the configuration and build it anywhere you wanted to in the county. It complicates your operational efficiency, and that's really what the ad hoc committee, we talked about with them, is if you take the jail, meaning the jail only, housing and jail support, and park it someplace, now you've just extended that distance of that skywalk to miles that you do in a squad. And now you start to have liability issues associated with that. Staffing needs to be increased, so the operational piece comes back into that. The perfect model would be, is if you took the jail, the sheriff's office, and the court system and found a place to build that campus. But that model, that's a justice center model, it's gonna be double your cost. So if 38 isn't a tolerable number for your county, double that's definitely not going to be. So it's finding something that works for you so that we can still gain the safety and security element component while planning for the future so that you don't have to do all of that at one time. And so the answer is, could a greenfield be built? Absolutely. Is it the best choice for where you guys sit right now financially? No. It's one of those things that would just increase cost. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Caleb, possibly, I guess. I know it's been discussed, board members and the board room, but has it been decided for sure that this is the option that we're going with, or is there still other options on the table, or?
Nothing's been decided.
Okay.
It's all preliminary.
And I think that's one thing about the communication plan that I heard from people, this decision has already been made. I think the decision has been made that they needed to do more exploration into what's the solution for the jail. I would say that working with the ad hoc committee members, they have been able to see more options and deeper discussion on this, right? And the communication plan all along was to get it out in front of the community so that they would know what's going on. It was about transparency, and I think that's been accomplished. Whether people like it or not, they know you guys have an issue to deal with, but to the chair's point, no decision has been made about what the option would be. Good question.
Yeah, so Stacy, you're saying that people are saying they're gonna be unhappy about building the jail, right?
Yeah.
No matter where it is, what it is, whatever, right?
There's a
But-
consensus that
Okay,
that's what's
so
going
with
on.
that being said, if we don't do a jail, the cost is gonna be the same because we won't be able to do what we do in our jail to remedy the problem, so your cost is gonna be different, but where you're gonna get the money to pay for it
Yeah.
is gonna be the issue. Is that the thing?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and, so Jamie explained the difference between our operating budget and capital expenses, okay? So let's say, for instance, this board just says it's not the time to build a new jail. And Brad, jump in if you want to, but we have issues in our jail, and one of the main ones is, mixed classifications. So there is a real chance that if you choose to stop progress on looking at a solution, we could lose our double bunking, which means that George will have to find a place for these other inmates. So right away, you're incurring, costs with out of county. Also, that means that Jeff will probably have to order deputies in to do those transports, because the sheriff likely isn't gonna want to leave just one patrol deputy for the entire county while one person is driving over to Barron, okay? So we are looking at out of county housing costs, and we are looking at increased, overtime costs for the sheriff's office. There are, a couple ways we can pay for that. We could look at going to referendum for going above and beyond our operating. That is out of the question for 2024 and probably as well for 2025. We're getting really close to do a referendum. Also, the optics on that aren't great. So Jamie said we're under levy limits. You guys approve a budget every year. If we go to referendum for going above and beyond our operating, it kind of gives the message that we know we have a problem and we're okay going after the taxpayers for more money instead of fixing the issue. The second thing we could look at is attrition, meaning that you guys as a board can make the hard decision to cut some services or some positions for the county to stay within budget. So for instance, if we think we're gonna be 500,000 over budget in 2025, you guys would be looking for ways to cut 500,000 from the budget. And then the third option is we could just go over budget and tap into our general fund. But, when Justin from Baird comes, to give you guys a presentation on finances, he will advise that that is not really, a great move because we have that general fund there, we have that healthy balance for a reason.
Can I jump in a second?
Mhm.
And also to look at the 38.5 million, we borrow for that, 20 years it's paid for. If we don't build the jail and then we incur all these costs, more staffing, more vehicles out of county, that will never go away. That will only increase in time. You know, we can give you a number of $45 or $65 a bed. That's if they'll take them. And not every year, but it gradually increases. And if you get a troubled inmate, we just have one here from Taylor County that, we dealt with. And we asked them to come get him. We don't want your inmate, so come get it. So now they gotta find somewhere to handle that inmate, which will probably in our area would be Douglas County at about the tune of $250 a day.
And I understand that, and what I was saying is, building a skywalk in 38.5, that's what's unacceptable to me. Just shift that safety aspect from an elevator, from the corridors you have now to make it an 80-foot long hallway. All we're doing is shifting our liability around. There's no way building that skywalk is the best option for safety of your employees. That's what I'm looking at there.
I don't disagree with that.
And I understand the $38.5 million, I get that. What I'm getting at is, that's an estimate of where we're at right now.
Right.
We don't have an actual hard cost of it's gonna be $38.5 million. We could tell you, yeah, go ahead, and you could come back and say, it's gonna cost you more like $48 million. I mean, there's a possibility of that. I'm not saying it's going to happen.
Right.
But that's something we all need to be aware of. What we're dealing with are estimated numbers right now. We have no exact figure of this is exactly what it's gonna cost, and it's not gonna cost us any more than that. And that's the point I'm making, and that's the point I'm hearing when people are calling me saying, we just lost our job, I can't afford an extra $100 or $70 a year. That's where it's coming from.
Right.
Okay? It's not a misunderstanding of the need, it's them stating, look, I can't afford that.
Yeah, the only thing that I would, just from the 38, so you understand, from an increase perspective, is that there will be checkpoints through the design to be able to maintain that. And then after you receive the bids, you are still not bound to award those bids. Meaning that those bids can be rejected by the county, and you could say, we need to redesign and rescope based on the numbers that we got in. If you make a decision to move forward with it, you are not bound to that number until you award those bids. So there is a design phase and a bid phase that you're still only bound in to the fees of that design phase. You are not committed to those numbers. So I've had some counties that after we bid it, if it's over budget, they said rescope it, we rescope it, we rebid it. We have other counties, if they bid it and it's obviously on budget, they're moving forward with it. If it's under budget, they're moving forward. There's some that say, here's the markets. If we're over by 1% or 2%, they move forward with it. So you have some flexibility even after you say, let's get designed.
Right, I understand that, I'm just making sure everybody's aware in here.
Yep.
But for those, there is the possibility it comes in
Understood.
higher or lower,
Right.
those are all possibilities, but they're possibilities that we all need to understand.
Correct.
We're dealing with estimated costs, not actual costs.
Absolutely.
Is it not fair, we've got a very important election coming up in November. Is it not fair, we all represent people in our area, is it not fair that we can have our county people vote on this in November?
For the referendum?
Yes.
Yeah, so the referendum discussion comes up quite often on these projects. And the state of Wisconsin has given you, the board, the authority to make these decisions. And the reason that they've done that is because you guys are gonna get more detail than those voters. Meaning that you're gonna hear things today, you're gonna start to dive into that budget, you're gonna start to make what you're gonna hear is, if the referendum would fail, let's say you took it to the referendum, you're still gonna have costs, like Ashley had just shared. If that referendum doesn't pass, your taxes will go up operationally unless you cut staff, unless you cut services. That's the sort of information that most of the time when you have a referendum, those voters that go to that poll, all they see is, do I wanna spend additional dollars? How do you word the referendum so that they have all of the information that you have? And I think we work with states throughout the Midwest, and Wisconsin has the model that they have given you the authority because you have more information. Not that other individuals couldn't get it, they could come to you and talk to you, but they don't. It's just when they go to vote for the presidential election, all of a sudden they see on a ballot, oh, by the way, we're building this jail. I heard something about that. I don't want to have my taxes go up. And they don't realize that the no means that their taxes will go up, but it'll just go up on the operational side. That's the piece that's in there of how do you get everybody that's to the poll to know all those details? And it's complicated. We just did town hall meetings and you can see how many people attended them. Now granted, there's probably discussions that have generated out of that, but out of your population of your entire county, we probably had 250 people total that attended them, and some of those were double counted, because some of them attended 3 of them. So that's the challenge that you have with the referendum. So, but that'll be a board decision of whether you decide to go to referendum or not. You do.
I wanna touch base on something that Ashley and Jeff said, and I know that Phil and John and Tom has kinda heard this spiel before, but I just wanna make sure that, you know, for the new members, they kinda understand where we're at. And Kurt, if I start to get into your presentation, let me know, cause I don't wanna eat into that, but Ashley had talked about the issue with the double selling. Now, for the people that don't know, one of my roles is that, annually I need to come in and inspect each county jail, in regards to DOC standards, you know, for safety, sanitation, adequacy, and fitness. If you ever have a hard time sleeping at night, you can look up statute 30137, read through it, and it'll probably put you to sleep, but that kinda talks about what my role is. Over the years, the last several years of doing inspections, we've identified the issue of this jail mixing classification. Now, what Ashley means about that is that per code, regardless with the age of this facility, all jails, you cannot mix classification in your dorms, and if you're a jail that's been approved to double cell, which Rusk County is, you can't mix classification in the cell. So meaning, max has to be with max, medium has to be with medium, males with males, females with females. Minimums with minimums. That's the simplest, okay? This county has been identified that they can't even meet that. Over the years of identifying classification issues, talking with George about it, based on the facility design, the county is struggling to do that. So, how we got here is that, you know, after several years of violation, I required that George submit a compliance plan saying, hey, how are you guys gonna do that? So the county said, hey, if we're gonna have classification, we're gonna have to house out. Now, is that a long-term solution? That's gonna be left up to you. But what does that mean if the county decides not to do something? It's going to mean that you're gonna have to contract with some county to house those issues. If you continue to meet mixed classification, if I come in and find that there's still mixed classification, what Ashley's talking about, then the DOC is gonna come in and write you a legal order saying, listen, we're going to take away your ability to double cell. Because if you're gonna continue to mix classification, if you're still gonna violate, we have to do something. So we're gonna take away that ability to double cell. So we're gonna take the bunks out of there. And we're also going to take away the beds in the dorms. So you can't mix classification in there. Unfortunately, what happens is you go from a 52 bed jail probably down to 18, somewhere in there. You're gonna be forced to house out because your population is gonna exceed that. Now, what happens then is that you're still gonna have to have a jail, okay? Jeff's team is going to arrest people. There's still gonna be bad guys. They're gonna arrest them. They have to come here. And regardless if you have one inmate in here, you still have to maintain it. You still have to staff it. You still have to provide food. You still have to provide medical. You're gonna have to provide all the contracts and services and do everything that's obligated from you statutorily for a jail, but yet you're also going to contract out and pay another county to house those inmates. That's the situation, okay? Now, the Department of Corrections has said, hey, we understand that you're in an interesting predicament and we're working with you. Okay, we don't wanna come in and just say, you know what, I don't care, boom, here it is, we're just gonna yank it and then put you guys in this position. That's how we got here today, okay? But, again, if the county decides like, hey, we're not going to do that, you know, we're just not gonna do anything, then we have to do something. And that's where it comes down. So, again, like, please don't think, it says that you bring up a great point, you know, about all the, you know, with the sky, all that stuff. But don't think that if shipping it out is the answer, you still have to maintain a jail, if you're going to do that. Now, if all of a sudden you're saying, we're just gonna get rid of the jail regardless, and Jeff and his team are gonna have to figure out a way that they're gonna arrest people, and if they take them to Barron, if they take them to Douglas, if you're going to Chippewa, whoever you decide to contract with, if you say, we're not gonna do that, Jeff will call me up, and they'll say, Brad, we're getting rid of our jail, it's officially empty, I'll come in, verify that it's empty, we'll decommission it. You no longer have a jail, you don't have to maintain it, you can throw boxes up there, you can use it for storage, it'll be whatever you wanna do with it. But in a year, 2 years, 6 months, whatever, if all of a sudden the county's like, this experiment that we're doing isn't working for us, we wanna bring them back, this is not a jail anymore. You start over. It has to start new. And I just need everybody to kind of understand that as new board members, what the predicament that you guys are in. Also, John, you bring up a great point about the classification thing. To any board members in here, new, and even the ones that are, you know, that got reelected, if you are nervous about, or if you're getting questions from a constituency about classification, and you're like, hey, I wanna know more about this so I can talk to my people about that, call me. And we'll walk through it, we'll discuss it, I'll sit down over a cup of coffee if you want, whatever, and I'll walk you through everything that, you know, on the classification, the issues with it. Because at the minimum, when we talk about the max, medium, minimums, male and female, that's the simplest. We can get into a whole nother slew of subclassifications that these guys deal with on a daily basis. You know, in regards to either it's transgender, or it's gonna be co-conspirators, or it's gonna be juveniles with adult charges, or it's gonna be people that just don't play nice with others. You know, how do they properly house them? Because at the end of the day, I don't want people to think like these are violations. Everything that we've done and what Kurt's gonna present to you guys it's risk management for the county. You know, we don't want to put people in places, mixing them with people, moving people around the skywalk, all that stuff, because risk goes up for the county. So that's what we wanna do. We wanna limit risk and also be able to meet the needs of what the county has to operate. So, any questions on that? And if you ever want seriously about the classification questions, whatever, I mean, you can reach out, they've got my number, you can I'd be more than happy to sit down and discuss or educate at least, you know, like what that all means, so.
I would say that, to the comment about classification, I did have several people come up to me and said it was clear to them, and it's not just your county. We're working with other counties that classification is an issue, and the buzzword is that, you know, this is a gender issue. It's part of it, but that's not all of it. And as we go through this slide, it seemed to help people. You know, we talked about people who are in the same crime and how to separate them, relationship within the community, because you're a small community, all those things start to compile. Jail population was another one of our population of our county is going down. Our jail population should go down. It's not a direct correlation. There's individuals who are going to participate in events that put them in jail that aren't part of your county. You've got to be able to deal with that population. So looking at your ADP and a forecast is elements that are tied into that. So again, I don't want to bore all of you, but is there other things that came up? I'm glad you guys are bringing those up. Other things that came up that you had questions on?
I just want to, one more point to Sherry. So I know a lot of you in here are about numbers, and I really appreciate that. Me and Jamie are into numbers too. And I want to talk about if we do have to house out of county, if the sheriff does have to order people in, we're looking at overtime costs. So for 2023, our jail overtime, and this is wages only, this doesn't include benefits, we were 128% over budget. The budget document is online if you want to look at it. So we budgeted approximately $60,000 and we spent $136,000 in overtime wages in the jail. patrol was 121% over budget. For 2024, and this is only through the end of the first quarter, patrol for overtime wages is already at 43% of what we budgeted in one quarter. Jail is at 34% of what was budgeted in overtime. And a lot of the contributing factors leading to that overtime is the fact that we are understaffed, both on the road and in the jail. And if we add this stress onto our current deputies, I believe that we will lose more of them. So not only are you looking at the hard numbers, you're looking at the financial cost, you also need to think that there's a human factor here. So when Jeff makes that phone call to order somebody in, they're leaving their day off. They should be able to have a day off. They're leaving their family. They're leaving the lake fishing, whatever they're doing, you're ordering them in to work that shift. So there's a financial impact and there's also a human impact. Just please remember that.
And to compound that, there were some questions about, can we just keep our jail the way it is and add just a smaller beds to the other wing? And I know you all attended it. You add posts, meaning that and a post is 5 positions round the clock annually to be able to deal with that. So one post is 5 people. And it's not just your county. There are other counties that are having a real hard time getting correctional officers to be able to come in and do their work. And we have found that counties like yours that have an older facility that has some safety and security issues, it's not a great draw in regards to a career, to the point that you wouldn't wanna work up there, right? So it's hard to be able to recruit individuals to come in there. Now, I've got one county where, we just finished a jail. It's a new jail, it's the pod style, it's got some secure elements in there. Neighboring counties are losing staff to go there just because it's a different environment. So it's things like that if you can get it staff efficient, find something that's a 3-post design, get something that is safe and secure, it will be something that attracts those individuals to be able to work there.
So is it fair to say that whether we say, yes, go ahead to do this, or no, we're not doing it, the cost to our taxpayers will be approximately the same?
Yeah,
It's just gonna either come from this hand or this hand is gonna be continual forever, this hand will be paid off eventually, is that
Yep.
at the end of the day what everybody's saying in here?
Yeah, right now, I've done some preliminary numbers based on some information that I had from other counties, right? So we're gonna work with, the finance advisor, to talk about mill rate impact operationally and mill rate impact on borrowing. And that is my goal by May to bring it to the full board, because you are exactly right. The operational cost of saying we're gonna house out of county, depending on the number that you put out of county and the transport costs and medical costs, they become very, very close to one another real quick. And what that does is that doesn't go away, and it does impact your operating side, big numbers, so.
I think it's important too I can't stress enough to what Kurt is saying about, the facility and how people are leaving to go work at other places. Here in presentations and whatever, we talk about inmates and moving and this and that. And that is a very, very important part of it, but it equally as important is the officer subject safety factors that would go along with the facility. Stacy touched base, you went upstairs, you said you couldn't pay you enough to work up there. Creating an environment that your sons and daughters and friends and neighbors and your public work in is an important factor, that you're providing them a safer environment to deal with individuals. When it comes to, dealing daily with them, moving inmates around from location to location, housing them properly, staff coming in and just doing their daily job. I think that can't be stressed enough.
This slide I just wanna touch on, because I know it was just brought up about the impact of people losing jobs.